course, moved millions of job seekers into work and supported young people through programmes like Kickstart and our apprenticeships offer.
Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now then, businesses in Ashfield are telling me they're struggling to recruit young apprentices, even though they're offering top wages and education up to degree level. Now, I'm doing my bit by hosting the apprenticeship fair, but what more can government do to ensure the young people in my area know that there are great, well-paid apprenticeship schemes so they can have a fantastic career on the doorstep and maybe a career in catering?
My honourable friend is absolutely right to say that it is a really important message that this whole House should send out, that apprenticeships really matter and that it is not the only way to succeed to go to university, but you can earn and learn at the same time on our great apprenticeship courses. I believe my right honourable friend the Chancellor visited Cornton Engineering in my honourable friend's constituency to promote apprentices, and of course I wish his apprenticeship fair every success.
Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor mentioned earlier that this plan for jobs is the long-term plan for restarting the economy. But would the government accept that perhaps they need to do more immediately than a long-term plan for jobs to help people with the cost of living crisis?
Minister.
We absolutely do accept that. That's why we brought forward a £22 billion package of support this year with help from reducing the burden of tax to support for things like energy bills, which is, of course, absolutely in recognition. This is a very challenging economic landscape for people to be operating in, owing to the impact of the global pressures that we are facing on inflation. We are absolutely clear that we've got a plan for jobs, a plan for growth, and that we will get through the current crisis and deliver a much better future for the people of this country on the other side of what have been a remarkable couple of years and a very difficult one for the whole developed world.
Number 13, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Small and medium-sized businesses are at the heart of our economy, creating jobs and prosperity across the UK. Last week, we wrote to over 2 million businesses, setting out our support to them, including a £1,000 cut to employment taxes, extending the annual investment allowance limit, reducing business rates and cutting fuel duty by 5p.
Considering responses to the Treasury's consultation on simplifying alcohol duty, will my honourable friend consider a model which broadly relates duty to alcohol strength, but without creating the massive complexity and cost for the UK's thousands of off-licences and wine shops, including important SMEs in Shropshire who create jobs supporting both the wine import and brewing sectors?
Minister.
Well, as my right honourable friend knows, we have set out our plans to make alcohol duty simpler and fairer, a change which is long overdue. That includes a new relief for draft beer, small producer relief for craft cider makers, and the end of the higher rate for sparkling wine. I am listening to the sector, and I've visited businesses to hear for myself to make sure that these reforms work in practice.
We now come to topicals with Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 1, please.
Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, if I may first of all wish my honourable friend from South East Cambridgeshire and ministerial colleague a very special and very happy birthday. Mr. Speaker, of course the government appreciates that global inflationary forces are making life difficult for families at the moment, and that's why we've brought forward, as we've heard, £22 billion worth of support this year to help those in work and the most vulnerable in our society, and we stand ready to do more as the situation evolves. But, Mr. Speaker, that support is part of a broader plan that will grow our economy, encourage investment and create more skilled, more high-wage jobs. That's the priority of this government.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you. With so much affluence in our country, poverty is a political choice, the choice of the Chancellor and the choice of his government. This week in York, energy companies cutting people's energy supply off, landlords evicting people, budgets that don't balance, poor mental health spiralling, and fear gripping people on low wages, ill and disabled people, and the elderly. This is a choice of the Chancellor. So why won't he increase social security payments, payments that should pay, not punish, and keep people safe and secure?
Mr. Speaker, this government and previous Conservative government's track record is very strong on reducing the number of people in poverty, because of course that's something that we want to achieve. With regard to, without question, the number one challenge facing families at the moment, which of course is energy bills, we've brought forward £9 billion worth of support. Many of people in her constituency will have already benefited from £150 worth of that, with £200 more to come. But some of the actions she mentions with regard to energy companies do sound not appropriate, and I'd be very happy happy to look into those specific cases.
Mr Speaker, on New Year's Eve, my constituent Jamie Rees suffered a cardiac arrest and died quite simply because the nearest defibrillator was not available. It was locked up in school buildings at the time. In his memory, Jamie's mum, Naomi Rees has set up a Just Giving page called RJ to provide externally mounted defibrillators in and around Rugby, but she quite reasonably points out that it shouldn't be left to grieving families to provide them, and there shouldn't be a postcode lottery in their availability. What funding can government provide to make more defibrillators available?
Good question.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his question and extend my heartfelt condolences to Naomi for the loss of her son. He may be interested to know that NHS England and NHSI, along with the British Heart Foundation, the Resuscitation Council UK and the Association of Ambulance Chief Executives, have developed the Circuit, which is a national defibrillator network which will register defibrillators in the UK and provide a national overview of where they can be found. I know that the Chancellor, as well as the Prime Minister, are interested in this issue, as I met the Prime Minister with the Honourable Member for Rushcliffe, and it is indeed an important issue.
We now come to Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At the spring statement, the Chancellor confirmed that the Conservative government rise in national insurance, a tax increase on working people and the businesses employing them, will go ahead. Since then, retail sales falling, consumer confidence tanking, GDP falling. We're the only G7 country increasing taxes on working people in the middle of a cost of living crisis. National insurance is the wrong tax increase at the wrong time. So does the Chancellor still think that his tax rises on working people is the right approach?
Chancellor.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady fails to mention what is about to happen, which is the biggest tax cut for working people we've seen in decades, and that is the rise in the national insurance threshold to £12,500, which means that 30 million people in work will receive, on average, £330 tax cut, and ensures, contrary to what she just said, that 70% of people in work will actually pay less tax this year than they paid last year.
Rachel Reeves.
So the Chancellor expects people to thank him for increasing their taxes to then decrease them a couple of months later. But the truth is, the Chancellor should be asking those with the broadest shoulders to pay a bit more in tax, like the North Sea oil and gas companies who are making record profits, and yet the Chancellor chooses not to tax them. And can the Chancellor explain today why he won't close the outdated, unfair and unjustifiable tax loophole that sees 70,000 people benefit from the non-dom tax status?
Well, Mr Speaker, Honourable Lady says that we should be asking those with the broader shoulders to pay. That's exactly what we are doing. The NHS and social care levy means that those with the broader shoulders, the top 15% of earners, will pay over half of the money raised from that levy. I think that's a levy that she believes should be scrapped. This is an entirely progressive way to raise money to fund what I know there is huge support in this House for, and that is tackling the NHS backlogs, Mr Speaker. And this government is keen to get on and fix the pressing challenges of this country. We will fund those things in a responsible way and a progressive way, and that's exactly the plan that we've put in place.
Sir Edward Lee.
I'm not sure there's much point in indulging in a blame game against the Bank of England or the Treasury, given that we're facing the unprecedented attack of a global pandemic and war in Europe. But the fact remains that Conservative governments that increased taxation during recession, like the first George Bush or John Major, go down to defeat. And more importantly, millions of families are now desperately worried about how they're going to pay the bill. So what I'd like the Chancellor now to do is to say his absolute priority, coming up with the budget, is to reduce the overall tax burden on working families.
Well, I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, and I can give him that assurance. That is our priority. We started last autumn by cutting the tax rate for those on the lowest incomes in universal credit. We carried that on in the spring statement by delivering a tax cut for those on lower middle incomes by raising the primary threshold, and our priority is to keep cutting taxes for those in work, including by cutting income taxes as soon as the public finances allow.
SNP spokesperson Alison Douglas.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, inflation is running out of control. Growth is flatlining and food and energy costs are spiralling. The Governor of the Bank of England yesterday was warning of apocalyptic food prices, and James Wither of Scotland Food and Drink says Brexit has made nothing better and a number of things worse. People and businesses have heard absolutely nothing from this Chancellor today on how he will tackle this urgent cost of living crisis. Nothing at all. So will he do it as the British Chambers of Commerce are asking and bring forward an emergency budget without any further delays?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Lady talks about Brexit. We've actually heard already about the difference that Brexit is making with a free port in Teesside, which because of Brexit we have been able to create, not just least there, but also up in Immingham, Southampton and other places. And as we've heard today, those innovations are bringing jobs and investment to parts of our country that need to see it. That's what this government promised to do, and that's what this government is absolutely delivering.
Mr. Speaker, I have 14 vineyards in my constituency of Wilden, and this is a growing industry in rural areas. I'm grateful for the Exchequer Secretary for meeting with me recently, but can I urge the Chancellor and the Exchequer Secretary to meet with my vineyard owners to hear face to face the anxieties they have over the Treasury's plans to hike tax on wine, more red tape by increasing 3 rates of duty to 27. This is an industry that needs nurturing. It creates thousands of jobs. So can I please propose a visit to one of my vineyards in Wilden?
Going to be a yes for that. Minister.
Well, she tempts me with a visit to a vineyard in her constituency. I will say to her that she already made the argument very strongly to me when I recently met the Wine and Spirits APPG. I'm sure, representing a wine-producing constituency, that she appreciates the reduction in the duty rate for sparkling wine that we have announced. As I said to my right honourable friend for Ludlow earlier, I am speaking to businesses in the sector to make sure that we get the practicalities right of introducing these reforms.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaking of broad shoulders, I'm interested. What makes the Chancellor, one of the richest men in the Commons and indeed the UK, in any way qualified to make policy or help the poorest people in my Livingston constituency, who as a result of the Tory cost of living crisis have to choose between heating and eating, something that he and people like him will never have to face?
Mr. Speaker, I'd urge the British people to judge me by my actions over the past 2 years. The record of this Conservative government stands for itself. We were there to help this country through the crisis, and we are there to help them today.
Go to the committee, Milstride.
Mr. Speaker, there has naturally been criticism of the Bank of England given the level of inflation and their inflation target. But amongst that criticism have been reports that some in government, including perhaps one member of the Cabinet, have actually been suggesting that the independence of the Bank of England should be removed. So could I ask my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, whether he agrees with me that it is essential that our central bank is independent in order to maintain the credibility and integrity of our monetary policy? And can he give a categoric assurance to the House that there are no plans of any kind to restrain the independence of our central bank?
Can I thank my honourable friend and chair of the Select Committee for his important intervention. I agree with him wholeheartedly, and whilst we do face challenges at the moment, the record of 25 years of central bank independence speaks for itself, with an average inflation rate of exactly 2%, and I know all colleagues will want to make sure that we return to that as swiftly as possible, and I can assure him that is both my and the Governor's ambition.
Brenda Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour have uncovered £3.5 billion worth of COVID contracts which were awarded to Tory-linked firms. Last week, Dominic Cummings said bunks were paid, with no civil service oversight, to newspapers. Why on earth does the Chancellor think the British public should trust him with the public finances when he manages the economy with the Prime Minister's mantra of one rule for us and one rule for everyone else?
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. Obviously, we are all clear that all fraud against the Exchequer is an outrage and totally wrong, and that's why we've established a £100 million taxpayer protection task force, which is precisely determined to focus on this. We've also got a new fraud function within government, which is heavily focused on making sure that we address these issues. Clearly, we are absolutely determined to make sure that where there has been wrongdoing, that we will crack down on it, we will recover the maximum extent of the money that we can. What I would say is, obviously, we had to balance, when introducing these schemes, the imperative for speed of delivery against the risks, and I think we struck the appropriate balance at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was widespread welcome for the announcement last week that the Government will introduce a Financial Services and Markets Bill. Could my right honourable friend confirm that the intention of that bill is to ensure that future regulation is proportionate, that the regulator is publicly accountable, and that we intend to maintain the international competitiveness of this great industry?
Minister.
Absolutely I can, and I note the observations of some economists yesterday. We will have an obligation on regulators to take account of competitiveness and where we are in the global context.
Alan Brown.
Mr. Speaker, compared to April 2020, our energy bills are now 75% more expensive. Petrol is 50% more expensive. So if the Chancellor thought an extra £20 a week was needed for universal credit 2 years ago, surely it agrees it must be reinstated as a matter of urgency.
Councillor.
Mr. Speaker, of course the government recognises that energy bills are the single biggest challenge that households are facing, and that's why we have provided £9 billion worth of support, £150 to English councils this most recent month, with £200 more support to come later this year.
Secretary Batty.
You, Mr. Speaker, I believe on this side of the House we are and we ought to be the party of hard-working families. And according to a Centre for Policy Studies report released yesterday, reducing the cost of childcare can increase GDP by 10% and increase access to opportunities for women in the workforce. Does my right honourable friend agree that helping hard-working families with childcare costs is good for the economy and it's the Conservative thing to do?
Yes,
I completely agree with my honourable friend. In fact, we do support families with the cost of childcare. One thing we do is provide families access to tax-free childcare. So that means that you can get a 20% reduction on the cost of childcare up to a cap of £2,000 a year.
All right.
Foreign Secretary is about to make a statement regarding unilateral changes to the Northern Ireland Protocol. This risks unpicking the Trade and Cooperation Agreement and also a trade war with the European Union. I understand that the Chancellor had been a voice for restraint and caution in Cabinet. Why has his view not prevailed?
Minister.
I don't want to foreshadow what the Foreign Secretary may or may not say in the statement that she makes next, but I want to reassure the honourable gentleman that with regards to the protocol, the government's overriding priority has been, and it continues to be, preserving peace and stability in Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can my right honourable friend confirm that a worker working full-time, 40 hours a week on a living wage is now £1,700 a year, better off in real terms than they were in 2010, and after July that will rise to almost £2,000, with everybody earning under £36,000 a year better off under this Conservative government this year?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I thank him for his support in championing policies which support his hard-working constituents. This government is always going to be aside of those people on lower middle incomes who are working hard to provide a better life for their families, Mr. Speaker, and we will keep delivering for them.
McCabe.
The Chancellor called the reduction in fuel duty in the spring statement a tax cut for hard-working families. Why are those families paying more for a litre of petrol today than they were then?
Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, sadly nothing we can do from this dispatch box can change global oil prices, but what we can do is reduce the taxes that we are responsible for. That tax cut, together with the freeze, is worth about £100 for a typical family driving, £200 or more for a van driver, and almost £1,500 for an HGV driver this year.
Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As including households that are impacted by the cost of living emergency, businesses in North Shropshire are facing unimaginable and unmanageable increases in their fuel bills and other input costs, and this has been compounded by the national insurance tax rise imposed by this government and paid by employers. Does the Minister agree, does the Chancellor agree, that the increase in national insurance for employers should be scrapped to keep our small businesses in business?
Well, we are absolutely determined to reduce the burden of tax facing both businesses and individuals. And of course, we've already heard during the course of the exchanges today about the action we've taken, for example, on the employment allowance and on business rates, which is precisely designed to help businesses succeed in what is obviously a challenging environment.
Abdul Khan.
Mr. Speaker, in my constituency of Manchester Gorton, one food bank has provided 1,269 emergency food parcels in 4 months, 40% of which have gone to children. Food banks are now reporting shortages as people cut back to make ends meet. This is no longer about living, it's about surviving. So will the government end their heartless policy and immediately scrap the national insurance hike? Will this government has introduced during the cost of living crisis?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, whether it's the expansion of the school breakfast club programme, the holiday activity and food programme, or indeed Healthy Start vouchers, this government is supporting families meeting the cost of food, particularly at this difficult time. He rightly talks about those children growing up in poverty. I'm proud that the best way to support those children is to ensure they do not grow up in a household where no one is working. And thanks to the actions of Conservative governments, 500,000 fewer children are now growing up in a workless household.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One group of companies doing well out of the cost of living crisis are the buy now, pay later lenders, with Klarna now valued at higher than Barclays or Lloyds. 1 in 12 of their customers is using buy now, pay later credit to pay for toiletries and basic food products. Will the Chancellor, who was boasting about our consumer credit profile earlier, name the date when our constituents can finally make good on the promise that was made in this House over 18 months ago to give these people protection from these legal loan sharks and access to the financial ombudsman?
Minister.
I can't give it a date, but it will be very soon.
Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My experience over the past 4 years or so proved without doubt that to truly level up South Yorkshire and the wider North will require transformative levels of investment. Does the Chief Secretary agree with that? And if he does he truly believe that the investment is there to meet the huge challenges that we undoubtedly face?
Minister.
Well, I'd like to start by paying tribute to the Honourable Gentleman for his service as the Mayor of South Yorkshire. I think he did an outstanding job, and it's very important, I think, that we recognise that we're going to need more great mayors from across this House and from outside Parliament to help deliver opportunity in the regions. We are absolutely clear that our programme of investment, through what is a record spending review, is designed to make sure that levelling up moves from the blueprint to reality over the course of the years ahead.
Mr.
Speaker, well, this government has completely failed on growth in the economy, with the IMF taking into account all the current government proposals, currently forecasting the UK will have the slowest growth in the G7 this year. Yeah. But the Minister will also know that putting money into the pockets of the least well-off not only relieves their hardship, but puts it into the local economy, as they have to spend it of necessity back into the local economy, thus stimulating growth. So instead of choking off growth with the £20 UC cut, with the NI hike, and with the refusal to use a windfall tax to relieve the hardship of those families, what new additional measures does the government propose to help hard-pressed families and to improve that IMF forecast on growth?
Thank you. The Honourable Lady cherry-picks the statistics. Last year we were the fastest growing economy in the G7. This year the second fastest. And after those other countries have caught us up next year, we will return to being the second fastest and the fastest growing economy. And there is more to come from this government to support growth. In the autumn we will cut taxes on business investment and innovation, which we all know is the best way to drive up productivity and growth.
Final question, Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. Ministers spoke earlier about using infrastructure to level up, and they're absolutely right. We need to link local communities to where the jobs are, so transport matters. Why then is there a lack of joined-up government? The Treasury is paying billions towards HS2 coming to Manchester, and yet the bill before Parliament will sever the Metrolink line through Audenshaw in my constituency to Manchester, meaning that the tram will not be able to run for 2 years. That's not levelling up, is it?
What is levelling up is making sure that we have a colossal programme of transport investment designed to make sure that connections both between regions but within regions are as strong as they possibly can be. And I'd refer to the £96 billion integrated rail plan, which sits at the heart of our ambition in this space. Clearly on the specifics of the proposal that he mentions, that's something for transport ministers and the Mayor of Greater Manchester to discuss.
The reason I let it run on because we were moving the writs early and we were late starting. Before I call the Secretary of State, I wish to make a short statement in context of this session. I'm exercising the discretion given to the Chair in respect of the resolution on sub judice matters to further extend the waiver granted for proceedings in January to allow full reference to the challenge to the Northern Ireland Protocol and to allow limited reference to the active legal proceedings. I will now call the Secretary of State, Elizabeth Truss. Secretary Truss.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to update the House on the Northern Ireland Protocol and to lay out the next steps. Our first priority is to uphold the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. That agreement put in place a new arrangement for the governance of Northern Ireland and these islands composed of 3 interlocking strands. A power-sharing government at Stormont on the basis of consent and parity of esteem for all communities. Intensified North-South cooperation on the island of Ireland. And enhanced arrangements for East-West cooperation. So much of the progress that we have seen in Northern Ireland rests on this agreement. And for the agreement to continue to operate successfully, all 3 strands must function successfully. These are the arrangements, are the foundation on which the modern, thriving Northern Ireland is built. It commands the support of parties across this House, and we will continue to work with all communities in Northern Ireland to protect it. As a government, we want to see a First Minister and Deputy First Minister in place, and we want to work with them to make further progress. The basis for successful power sharing remains strong, as my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, laid out yesterday. However, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is under strain, and regrettably, the Northern Ireland Executive has not been fully functioning since early February. This is because the Northern Ireland Protocol does not have the support necessary in one part of the community in Northern Ireland. I would also note that all of Northern Ireland's political parties agree on the need for changes to the protocol. The practical problems are clear to see. As the House will know, the protocol has not yet been implemented in full due to the operation of grace periods and easements. However, EU customs procedures for moving goods within the UK have already meant companies are facing significant costs and paperwork. Some businesses have stopped trade altogether. These challenges have been sharpened by the post-COVID economic recovery. Rules on taxation mean that citizens in Northern Ireland are unable to benefit fully from the same advantages as the rest of the UK, like the reduction in VAT on solar panels. SPS rules mean that producers face onerous restrictions, including veterinary certification, in order to sell foodstuffs in shops in Northern Ireland. These practical problems have contributed to the sense that the East-West relationship has been undermined. Without resolving these and other issues, we will not be able to re-establish the executive and preserve the hard-won progress sustained by the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We need to restore the balance in the agreement. Mr. Speaker, our preference is to reach a negotiated outcome with the EU, and we have worked tirelessly to that end and will continue to do so. I have had 6 months of negotiations with Vice President Maros Sefcovic. This follows a year of discussions undertaken by my predecessor. The UK has proposed what we believe to be a comprehensive and reasonable solution to deliver on the objectives of the protocol. This includes a trusted trader scheme to provide the EU with real-time commercial data, giving them confidence that goods intended for Northern Ireland are not entering the EU single market. We're already sharing over 1 million rows of goods movement data with the EU every week. Our proposed solution would meet both our and the EU's original objectives for the protocol. It would address the frictions in East-West trade while protecting the EU single market and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The challenge is that this solution requires a change in the protocol itself, as its current drafting prevents it from being implemented. But the EU's mandate does not allow the protocol to be changed. That is why their current proposals are not able to address the fundamental concerns. In fact, it's our assessment that they would go backward from the situation we have today with the standstill. As the Prime Minister said, our shared objective has to be to find a solution that can command the broadest possible cross-community support for years to come and protect the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions. That is why I am announcing our intention to introduce legislation in the coming weeks to make changes in the protocol. Our preference remains a negotiated solution with the EU, and in parallel with the legislation being introduced, we remain open to further talks if we can achieve the same outcome through negotiated settlement. I've invited Vice President Šefčovič to a meeting of the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee in London to discuss this as soon as possible. However, to respond to the very grave and serious situation in Northern Ireland, we are clear there is a necessity to act to ensure the institutions can be restored as soon as possible. The Government is clear that proceeding with the bill is consistent with our obligations in international law and in support of our prior obligations in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And before any changes are made, we will consult businesses and people in Northern Ireland as our proposals are put forward. I want to be clear to the House that this is not about scrapping the protocol. Our aim is to deliver on the protocol's objectives. We will cement those provisions which are working in the protocol, including the common travel area, the single electricity market, and North-South cooperation, whilst fixing those elements that aren't, on the movement of goods, goods regulation, VAT, subsidy control, and governance. The bill will put in place the necessary measures to lessen the burden on East-West trade and to ensure the people of Northern Ireland are able to access the same benefits as the people of Great Britain. The bill will ensure that goods moving and staying within the UK are freed of unnecessary bureaucracy through our new Green Channel. This respects Northern Ireland's place in the UK, in its customs territory, and protects the UK internal market. At the same time, it ensures that goods destined for the EU undergo the full checks and controls applied under EU law. This will be underpinned by data sharing arrangements that I've already set out. It will allow both East-West trade and the EU single market to be protected, whilst removing customs paperwork for goods remaining in the United Kingdom. The bill will remove regulatory barriers to goods made to UK standards being sold in Northern Ireland. Businesses will be able to choose between meeting UK or EU standards in a new dual regulatory regime. The bill will provide the Government with the ability to decide on tax and spend policies across the whole of the United Kingdom. It will address issues related to governance, bringing the protocol in line with international norms. At the same time, it will take new measures to protect the EU single market by implementing robust penalties for those who seek to abuse the new system. And it will continue to ensure there is no hard border on the island of Ireland. I will publish more detail on these solutions in the coming weeks. And let me be crystal clear that even as we do so, we will continue to engage with the EU. The bill will contain an explicit power to give effect to a new revised protocol if we can reach an accommodation that meets our goal of protecting the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. We remain open to a negotiated solution, but the urgency of the situation means we can't afford to delay any longer. The UK has clear responsibilities as the sovereign government of Northern Ireland to ensure parity of esteem and the protection of economic rights. We are clear that the EU will not be negatively impacted in any way, just as we have ensured the protection of the EU single market since the existence of the protocol. We must restore the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in all of its dimensions as the basis of the restoration of the executive. And we will do so through technical measures designed to achieve the stated objectives of the protocol, tailored to the reality of Northern Ireland. We will do so in a way that fundamentally respects both unions, that of the United Kingdom and of the EU. And we will live up to our commitments to all communities of Northern Ireland. As co-signatory of the co-guarantor of the Good Friday Belfast Agreement, we will take the necessary decisions to preserve peace and stability. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Stephen Doherty.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and we're grateful for advance sight of the statement from the Foreign Secretary. And I want to give apologies on behalf of the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who's unfortunately self-isolating due to COVID. It is over 2.5 years since the government negotiated and signed the withdrawal agreement. That deal included the Northern Ireland Protocol, which required, by its design, some trade barriers and checks in the Irish Sea. That was clear from the outset. It was a choice by this Prime Minister, by the government. And yet now, barely 2 years later, the government is trying to convince people its flagship achievement was not a negotiating triumph, but a deal so flawed that they cannot abide by it. Either they did not understand their own agreement, they were not upfront about the reality of it, or they intended to break it all along. The Prime Minister negotiated this deal, signed it, ran an election campaign on it. He must take responsibility for it and make it work. Mr Speaker, the situation in Northern Ireland is incredibly serious. Power sharing has broken down, Stormont is not functioning and political tensions have risen. And people and communities across Northern Ireland face rising bills as the cost of living crisis deepens. The operation of the protocol has created new tensions that do need to be addressed by listening to all sides, to business and to consumers. And both the UK government and the EU need to show willing and good faith. This is not a time for political posturing or high-stakes brinkmanship. Everyone recognises that the situation in Northern Ireland is unique, and we want checks to be reduced to their absolute necessary minimum and for them to properly reflect trade-related risks. It cannot, for example, be right that goods leaving Great Britain that have no realistic prospect of leaving Northern Ireland, like supermarket sandwiches, face excessive burdens, and the EU needs to understand that practical reality. Unnecessary barriers will only hamper business, inhibit trade and undermine confidence and consent. But, Mr Speaker, the Good Friday Agreement was one of the proudest achievements of the last Labour government. It is absolutely essential that it is protected, and that is why we need calm heads and responsible leadership. We need a UK government capable of the hard diplomatic graft to find solutions and an EU willing to show flexibility. But the right response to these challenges cannot simply be to breach our commitments. It is deeply troubling for the Foreign Secretary to be proposing a bill to apparently break the treaty that the government itself signed just 2 years ago. That will not resolve issues in Northern Ireland in the long term, and rather it will undermine trust and make a breakthrough more difficult. It would drive a downward spiral in our relationship with the EU that will have damaging consequences for British businesses and consumers. It's Cornish fishermen, County Down farmers and Scotch whisky makers who will lose out, holding back the economy while growth forecasts are already being revised down. But, Mr Speaker, this goes beyond matters of trade. Britain should be a country that keeps its word. The rest of the world is looking at us and wondering if we're a country that they want to do business with. When we seek to negotiate new deals abroad, does the government want to make other countries question whether we will keep our end of the bargain? There are wide-ranging and damaging repercussions, undermining our ability to hold others to account for their own commitments, when we should, for example, be pulling together in support of Ukraine, not fuelling divisions with our European allies. Mr Speaker, the right approach is for the government and the EU to work together to find practical solutions to these problems, to brief the media less and to negotiate more. There is no long-term unilateral solution. Only a solution that works for all sides and delivers for the people and businesses of Northern Ireland will have durability and provide the political stability that businesses crave and the public deserve. And we believe that that should begin with a veterinary agreement that would eliminate the vast majority of checks on produce going from Britain to Northern Ireland. New Zealand, Mr Speaker, has an equivalence agreement, and it should not be beyond the government and the EU to negotiate one that reflects the unique circumstances in Northern Ireland. And we would also, Mr Speaker, negotiate with the EU for more flexibility on VAT in Northern Ireland to fully align Northern Ireland VAT rules with those of Great Britain. And we would use that to take VAT off Northern Ireland's energy bills, funded by a one-off windfall tax on oil and gas producer profits, to help ease the cost of living crisis. If the government is determined to plough on with the bill the Foreign Secretary has proposed, Will they agree to pre-legislative scrutiny by the Foreign Affairs Select Committee? And will they set out clearly to the House why this doesn't break international law? Mr. Speaker, Labour wants to make Brexit work and for Britain to flourish outside the EU. We want the government... But Mr. Speaker, we want the government to take responsibility for the deal it signed, to negotiate in good faith and to find practical solutions, not take reckless steps to prolong uncertainty in Northern Ireland and damage Britain's reputation. We want the EU to show the necessary flexibility to minimise all barriers and to work with the UK government and listen to all sides in Northern Ireland. That, Mr. Speaker, is the right approach. That is the responsible approach, and it's what is in the long-term interests of the people of Northern Ireland and indeed the whole of the United Kingdom.
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, our priority has to be, as the United Kingdom government, peace and stability in Northern Ireland and the protection of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. It's vitally important that we get the executive back up and running and functioning, and we fix the very real issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol. I welcome the honourable gentleman's acknowledgement that there are issues with taxation, with customs, with procedures and bureaucracy. In order to fix those issues, it does require the EU to be open to changing the protocol. And as yet, and I've had 6 months of talks with Vice President Šefčovič, my predecessor had 12 months of talks. As yet, the EU have been unwilling to open the protocol. And without that, we cannot deal with the tax issue, we cannot deal with the customs issue, and we will not sort out the fundamental issues in Northern Ireland. And it is our responsibility as the government of the United Kingdom to restore peace, to restore the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, to get the executive up and running. And in answer to the honourable gentleman's question about legality, we are very clear that this is legal in international law, and we will be setting out our legal position in due course.
Now comes the Chair of the Select Committee, Simon Hall.
The first duty of government is to uphold the law. If it tries to bob and weave and duck around that duty when it's inconvenient, if government does that, then so will the governed. And then nothing is safe, not home, not liberty, not life itself. Not my words, but Margaret Thatcher's. Respect for the rule of law, Mr. Speaker, runs deep in our Tory veins. I find it extraordinary that a Tory government needs to be reminded of that. Could my right honourable friend assure me that support for and honouring of the rule of law is what she and the government is committed to?
Well, I can assure my honourable friend that we are committed to upholding the rule of law. We are clear that this bill is legal in international law, and we will set out the legal position in due course.
SNP spokesperson Richard Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Foreign Secretary for advance sight of her statement. We've heard plenty, I think, about the alleged shortcomings of the protocol, but just to have an acknowledgement of the government's own role in negotiating the protocol, it doesn't even seem to have reached the level of even being limited and specific in what we've heard today. Because ultimately, the problem that this legislation purports to deal with isn't to do with a protocol that was only made necessary by the kind of Brexit the government eventually negotiated. It was the very nature of that settlement that contained the seeds of the problem. Now, I don't deny for one moment, and neither do my colleagues, the hurt and upset caused to many in Northern Ireland by the protocol. But let's not forget that Scotland and Northern Ireland as a whole both voted against Brexit, and there was not cross-union consent for where we are now. And if the consequences of that deal are judged to not be working in the best interests of the people of Northern Ireland, we need, Mr. Speaker, to also be honest and recognise that the consequences of the entire withdrawal agreement are not working in the interests of anywhere else in the UK either. Because getting Brexit done has meant creating border checks for goods leaving Great Britain to go to the EU and to go to Northern Ireland, while it's an absolute free-for-all for anything that is coming back into Great Britain. Now, Mr. Speaker, we on these benches have said all along that a stable agreement needs to be reached with the EU, which works for all parts of the UK. And I wish the UK government well in that. Genuinely, I do.
But with the crisis in Ukraine, the last thing we need to be doing is thrashing around here pointlessly in a snare of our own making. Domestic legislation, even if passed, will not wash away the need to comply with international commitments already made, and neither is it going to change the fact that if the UK is neither in nor aligned with the single market and the customs union, it's still going to create a trade border that needs to go somewhere. Mr Speaker, to restore devolved government in Northern Ireland and to resolve the self-inflicted wounds of Brexit, it's going to need goodwill, trust and a negotiated settlement. I'm sorry to say that the threats of unilateral legislative action by this government to override its own deal are very unlikely to be taken seriously in Belfast. They won't be taken seriously in Brussels. And there's absolutely no reason why it should be taken seriously in this place either.
Foreign Secretary.
I have been very clear that we are open to a negotiated solution, but that negotiated solution needs to deliver on the ground in Northern Ireland and address the very real problems with the protocol, which the honourable gentleman acknowledges, namely the fact that the people of Northern Ireland can't currently benefit from UK tax decisions, state aid decisions, and the fact that there is still full customs implementation on goods coming into Northern Ireland. In order to address those issues, it's not just the implementation of the protocol itself does need to change, and we need that change in the mandate from the EU. But it is absolutely our preference to have a negotiated solution with the EU, but we have to be clear that those changes need to happen. Otherwise, it's simply not going to deliver on the ground in Northern Ireland. It's not going to restore the balance as set out in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and we're not going to see the executive in Northern Ireland back up and running, which is what we want to see.
Theresa Willis.
The EU's approach to the protocol is so unreasonable that it's actually banning the movement of tree saplings from Great Britain to Northern Ireland for planting for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. So will the Foreign Secretary promise that her new enhanced Green Channel will not just disapply customs rules, it will also disapply these unreasonable and excessive SPS rules on plant and foods?
Well, my honourable friend is right to point out the very real issues the protocol is causing, particularly on SPS rules, and particularly in respect to goods that are never have any plans to be there aren't plans to transport those goods into the Republic of Ireland. And she is right, our proposals will ensure that those goods are able to travel freely through the Green Lane into Northern Ireland as part of a trusted trader scheme. And any company violating that scheme and not following the rules, there will be enforcement to make sure we protect the EU single market. This is a pragmatic solution. We are supplying commercial data to the EU. We are supplying it in real time so that they are able to manage the EU single market at the same time as protecting our UK single market.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr Speaker, I agree that the Commission needs to move further to reduce unnecessary checks and paperwork on goods moving between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. A sandwich made in Yorkshire, sold in Belfast, presents no threat whatsoever to the integrity of the European Union single market. But why does the Foreign Secretary think that threatening unilaterally to change an international treaty, and I look forward to seeing the description of why that is legal, is going to help encourage the Commission to change its approach, especially when it's likely to undermine trust further and may result in trade retaliation, which is not in the interest of any of our constituents, is it?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, the honourable gentleman points out that we do need to see more flexibility from the EU, and we do need to see a changed mandate, because the point he was making about sandwiches from Yorkshire, that cannot be addressed within the operation of the protocol. The protocol itself needs to be changed. And I've had 6 months of discussions with Maros Sefcovic. My predecessor had a year of discussions, and there still has not been an agreement from the EU to change the protocol itself, which would fix the issues the honourable gentleman has raised. So We are in a position now where we have seen the Belfast Good Friday Agreement undermined. We've seen the balance upset in Northern Ireland. We haven't seen the executive established since February. So in the absence of being able to achieve a negotiated solution with the EU, this is why we are bringing forward legislation. But I'm very clear, I would very much be hopeful that the EU will change their position, that they are prepared to enter negotiations on that basis to fix the very real issues the Honourable Gentleman mentions. On the point about the response from the EU, I would point out that our solution makes the EU no worse off. You know, we have proposals to protect the single market, to make sure that there is enforcement of the green lane and the red lane. So I would hope that they look at our proposals in a reasonable way, as we are putting them forward in a reasonable way, and that we can work together on a solution.
Sir William Cash.
May I commend my right honourable friend for her excellent statement, and my right honourable friend the Prime Minister on Section 38 of the Withdrawal Agreement Act 2020, which enables her bill to use our sovereignty, notwithstanding the protocol. Will she also ensure by instructions to Parliamentary Council that the bill fully satisfies our sovereignty and the constitutional integrity of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom and the Good Friday Agreement, and that the European Court and EU law do not displace UK law, and I urge her to strongly take the advice of the Attorney General on matters of international law, despite siren voices to the contrary.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his great expertise in this matter. And just to be clear, on the subject of the ECJ, our solution is to have an arbitration mechanism in place, like we have in the TCA, rather than having the ECJ as the final arbiter.
Sir Geoffrey Donalds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the outset in this House, the DUP warned about the consequences of this protocol, and that's why we opposed it from the beginning, because we recognised the political and economic instability it would cause and the harm it would create for the Union itself. The statement today is a welcome, if overdue, step. That is a significant move towards addressing the problems created by the protocol and getting power sharing based upon a cross-community consensus up and running again. Therefore, we hope to see progress on a bill in order to deal with these matters in days and weeks, not months, and as the legislation progresses, we will take a graduated and cautious approach. We want to see the Irish Sea border removed, and the Government honouring its commitment in the New Decade New Approach Agreement to protect Northern Ireland's place in the UK internal market. The statement today indicates this will be covered in the legislation to bring about new revised arrangements. Under the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, power sharing can only be stable if consensus exists on a cross-community basis. It does not exist at the moment on the part of the Unionist community. We want to see the political institutions properly functioning as soon as possible. But to restore Unionist confidence, decisive action is now needed in the form of legislation to repair the harm done by the protocol to the acts of union and to put in place sensible arrangements that, in the words of the Queen's speech, ensure the continued success and integrity of the whole of the United Kingdom, including the internal economic bonds between all its parts. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the words today are a good start, but the Foreign Secretary will know that it is actions that speak louder than words. And I welcome her commitment to such decisive action in this statement to the House.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman. What everybody in Northern Ireland agrees on, all parties, is that the Northern Ireland Protocol is not working. And we don't have cross-party consent to move forward. I think it's vitally important to restore the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which provided for power sharing in Northern Ireland to ensure we have the consent of all communities. And it is the government's priority, above all else, to make sure that we protect peace and stability in Northern Ireland. That is our first duty as the sovereign government of the United Kingdom.
Chris Grayling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We hear a lot in today's discussion about the legal position of the United Kingdom. But it seems to me, having read the protocol very carefully, that there's a very real question mark about the legal position of the European Union, because the protocol contains a lot of caveats around the protection of community relations in Northern Ireland, none of which appear to be being fulfilled at the moment. So will she ensure that she takes proper legal advice about their position, and we don't just listen to all the comments about our position?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, my right honourable friend makes an important point. The issue with the protocol is that we have found, despite entering the protocol in good faith, that it has not operated as we foresaw. And it is causing the very real problems that we see in Northern Ireland today. This is why our number one priority is to seek a negotiated solution with the EU. But in the absence of that, option being available, it is why it is so important we act now to restore the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, to restore the balance in Northern Ireland, and to make sure all communities in Northern Ireland are treated with esteem.
Ben Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why should the hard-pressed public of the United Kingdom, facing an unprecedented cost of living crisis, pay even higher prices as a result of a trade war caught with our main trading partners, because she and the DUP want to tear up the agreement the Prime Minister negotiated and she voted for?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm very clear that our priority is seeking a negotiated solution with the EU, and none of the proposals that I have put forward today make the EU any worse off. We want a solution that works for the EU single market and also works for the UK single market. But the reality is the people of Northern Ireland are paying higher prices as a result of the operation of the protocol. So, for example, the Road Haulage Association says that the protocol has caused a 34% increase in the cost of moving goods to Northern Ireland. So we are facing a real cost of living impact in Northern Ireland. What we want to do is fix the protocol to the benefit of both the United Kingdom and the European Union.
Robert Betland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Article 1 of the protocol makes it very clear that that agreement is to be without prejudice to the Good Friday Belfast Agreement regarding the constitutional status of Northern Ireland. That means surely that the Good Friday Agreement takes primacy over the protocol. And if that is right, what evidence will my right honourable friend bring forward to make it very clear that it is necessary for change if we are to avoid a degradation or a degrading in the constitutional order and order generally in Northern Ireland?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, my right honourable friend makes a very important point about the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which has been vital for peace and stability in Northern Ireland, and it is our priority to restore that. And as I've said, we will set out our legal position in due course.
Colm Eastwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What we've heard from this government today is absolutely astonishing. So this morning, the government announced that they're going to ride roughshod over the wishes of victims in Northern Ireland by ripping up an international agreement called the Stormont House Agreement. Now the Foreign Secretary has confirmed that she's going to go against the majority, despite what she might say, the majority of citizens in Northern Ireland who support the protocol by ripping up an international agreement called the Withdrawal Agreement. Mr. Speaker, it's a very, very simple question, despite what some people, they might not want to listen to the majority of people in Northern Ireland. It's a very simple question. How can any international partner or how can any citizen in the north of Ireland ever trust this government again?
Foreign Secretary.
In response to the honourable gentleman, an overwhelming proportion of people in Northern Ireland, 78%, agreed that the protocol needs to change in polling conducted in December 2021. So it's simply not true to say a majority of people in Northern Ireland support the protocol. And as the honourable gentleman knows, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is based on power sharing, it's based on esteem for all communities. And what we want to find, ideally with the EU, is a solution that works for all the communities in Northern Ireland.
Sir Oliver Hill.
The UK-EU Parliamentary Partnership Assembly met for the first time in Brussels last Thursday, and we had the opportunity of a lively encounter between the Paymaster General and Commissioner Šefčovič. But members were able to ask about the sort of points that have been discussed today. And it was clear from Commissioner Šefčovič that he believed there was a landing place for an agreement on these difficult matters. And so could I just urge my right honourable friend to go the extra mile and see if we can get an agreement? Because if we could, it would open up all the other opportunities for cooperation in energy, science and so many other things.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I can assure my honourable friend that that is absolutely what I want to do. I spoke to Commissioner Šefčovič last night. I want to see a meeting immediately of the Joint Committee to discuss this, but it will require to fix these very real issues in Northern Ireland, particularly on areas like customs and tax, where some of these points are baked into the protocol. In order to change the situation on the ground in Northern Ireland, we do need changes to the protocol, and that is the issue that as yet, and I have had numerous discussions with Maroš Šefčovič about this, as yet there isn't agreement for his mandate to change, to include changes to the protocol. So that is the fundamental issue we're facing, but I am very, very willing to have those discussions. I'm seeing the Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney later this week to have further discussions with him. We're very open to resolving these issues between the UK and the EU, but we do need a real acknowledgement of what is happening on the ground in Northern Ireland and the fact that the protocol does need to change.
Fleur Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So much for getting Brexit done, so much for oven ready. What is the cost of the proposed actions? The Treasury has drawn up economic impact assessments for this course of action. When will the government release them for the House?
Well, the solution that we are putting forward will actually save costs by reducing the bureaucracy that traders are currently facing shipping goods into Northern Ireland. So our overall proposal benefits traders into Northern Ireland, it benefits the people of Northern Ireland, it doesn't make the EU any worse off, and it helps protect the single market.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I warmly welcome this statement, as I am sure will the Nobel laureate Lord Trimble, who wrote in a national newspaper this morning it was urgent to address the problems of the protocol. As an architect of it with John Hume nearly a quarter of a century ago, he also raised the issue of the adverse influence of the European Court of Justice in Northern Ireland. So can the Foreign Secretary assure the House that under her sixth heading, which I think she called governance, she will take action on that issue as well, please?
Foreign Secretary.
I can assure my honourable friend that we will take action to ensure the arbitration mechanism is in place for Northern Ireland as it is in the TCA, rather than having the ECJ as the final arbiter, which it is as present. And he is right to highlight the article today by Lord Trimble. We need to go back to the original thinking behind the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which was about treating the communities of Northern Ireland with equal esteem to make sure that we have successful arrangements in place to protect peace and political stability, and that has to be this government's priority.
Stephen Farry.
Thank you. The protocol represents Northern Ireland's soft landing from this government's decision to have a hard Brexit. And let me be very, very clear. there is a majority of voters in Northern Ireland, MLAs and the business community who want to see the issues with the protocol addressed in a pragmatic way through building trust and partnership with the European Union, not through damaging unilateral action which will damage the UK's international reputation, including with the United States. And specifically on the issue of the European Court of Justice, does the Foreign Secretary understand that if she tinkers with that jurisdiction, that will force Northern Ireland out of the single market for goods and undermine Northern Ireland's ability to attract investment in terms of our dual access to both the European Union and Great Britain?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, what we're proposing for Northern Ireland is a dual regulatory system that encompasses either EU or UK regulation as those businesses choose, that reflects its unique status of having a close relationship with the EU whilst being part of the UK single market.
Duncan Smith.
Welcome my right honourable friend's statement. The powerful article that was referred to by Lord Trimble, one of the architects of the Good Friday Agreement, makes it very clear that the maintenance of the Good Friday Agreement overcomes everything else. And so to that extent, it would be helpful if those who bang on about this at the moment on the other side to know if they read the protocol, Article 13.8 makes it absolutely clear that the protocol can be, through negotiation, changed in whole or in part. Now, the point here is, therefore, my right honourable friend is quite correct. The EU now needs to step up to their responsibilities in that protocol and do what 13.8 tells them to do.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, my right honourable friend is right. The protocol was never designed to be set in stone. And what we have seen is the very real consequences of the protocol, which has not yet been fully implemented on the ground in Northern Ireland. And it has caused political instability. It has caused imbalance in the relationship between the communities in Northern Ireland. And we do need to fix that. And my strong preference is for the EU to secure a change in mandate so we can find a negotiated settlement. I completely agree with Commissioner Šefčovič. There is a landing zone to be had. But what we do need to see is that flexibility so we can really make sure there's a proper green channel operating into Northern Ireland, that we can ensure the people of Northern Ireland are benefiting from the same tax benefits as the people of Great Britain, and so we can fix those problems in a sustainable way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With a cost of living crisis and rising tension in Northern Ireland, the last thing our country needs is a poisonous standoff with the EU and the prospect of a trade deal with our largest trading partner. But until recently, the Prime Minister himself was saying, don't worry, it's all okay, there will be no border down the Irish Sea, and ministers were incredulously parroting the lines that we will only break international law in a limited and specific way. So does the Foreign Secretary agree that it is the pinnacle of incompetence or deceit for someone to negotiate and sign a deal when they have no intention whatsoever of honouring that deal?
Foreign Secretary.
As I've said, our priority is securing peace and stability in Northern Ireland and restoring the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. The protocol was agreed in good faith, but it has had unintended consequences, and it is the responsibility of the United Kingdom government to take action to restore the balance. Our preference is a negotiated solution with the EU. We think there is a landing zone to achieve that, but it does require the EU to change its mandate.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Can I just point out to my right honourable friend that I only reluctantly voted for the protocol and the withdrawal agreement on the basis that we weren't allowed to conclude a permanent trading agreement with the EU until we left, and that it would be superseded or overtaken in due course. Can I also just point out, apart from the disagreement about whether we should have legislation, there seems to be very broad agreement across this House, as there was when I proposed a motion to this House on the 15th of July last year, which the Labour Party actually supported with very warm words, saying there were legitimate concerns amongst the unionist community that had to be addressed. It's a shame the Labour Party won't will the means as well as the ends But can I invite her? Can I invite her to engage the reasonable elements of the Labour Party to support her negotiating position so that we can reach a negotiated settlement?
Foreign Secretary.
I am very happy to engage with colleagues across the House, in particular to explain the issue of why there needs to be a change in the protocol itself to fix the issues about making a clear green lane between GB and Northern Ireland and resolving these taxation issues. Because that is the fundamental issue with the negotiations with the EU, which we have conducted in good faith. I've had numerous negotiations and conversations with Commissioner Šefčovič over the past 6 months, but fundamentally the EU's mandate does not allow those changes to be made that would help us create the green lane, to create the free flow of goods between GB and Northern Ireland, and also address this unfairness in the tax system, where the Chancellor announces a cut to the VAT on solar panels, but that can't be implemented for the people of Northern Ireland.
Leila Moran.
Mr. Speaker, however, she may dress this up. Unilaterally changing a previously agreed international treaty is breaking it. And it is doublespeak to suggest otherwise. The consequences are real. Ordinary families up and down this country will have higher prices to pay because of a trade war. So could she take this opportunity to be honest with the British people? If we get to the point where tariffs are raised as a result of a trade war with the EU, how much will they have to pay? Or does she not care?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we're very clear that this bill is legal in international law, and as I've said, we will set out our legal position in due course. Our proposals, which we'll be outlining in more detail over the coming weeks, are very clear about how we protect the EU single market. Currently, businesses in Northern Ireland and Great Britain are facing increased costs as a result of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Our proposals would deal with those costs whilst protecting the EU single market. The EU will be no worse off as a result of our proposals.
Scott Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is genuine anger in the Loyalist community about the protocol and the way in which many people feel it undermines their British identity. Now that it has been unanimously rejected at the ballot box by the Unionist community, what assurances can my right honourable friend give me that if the negotiations continue to fail, we will see a bill over the coming days and weeks, not months, in this House?
Foreign Secretary.
We're committed to introducing a bill to resolve the very real issues on the ground in Northern Ireland. In parallel, we are open to negotiations with the EU, but in order to proceed on those negotiations, the EU do have to be willing to change the protocol itself to fix those very real issues.
Paul Blomfield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Foreign Secretary knows that there were only 3 ways of protecting Northern Ireland's special position after Brexit: a land border on the island of Ireland, which we all reject; closer alignment between the UK and the EU, which business wanted but the government rejected; and a sea border. The Prime Minister chose a sea border. He knew the checks it would involve, but he denied it to the Unionist community. Now, there are solutions which can be negotiated, but isn't the reason for today's statement that the government and the Foreign Secretary, for reasons of her own ambition, see advantage in fuelling Brexit divisions?
Foreign Secretary.
I don't agree with the honourable gentleman's analysis. There is a solution, and we have put it forward to the EU, of using commercial data that is collected in the normal course of business, sharing that in real time with the EU, making sure there are strong protections on the Trusted Trader Scheme so that any untoward activities are acted against. We can do all of that and make that happen and protect the EU single market, whilst at the same time enabling the free flow of trade. What we need, though, is we need flexibility in the EU's mandate so they are prepared to change the protocol. And as many people in this House have already said, the protocol was never intended to be set in stone. But it is our duty as the United Kingdom government to act to restore peace and stability in Northern Ireland.
Okay, you're right, Rosie. Thank you. Thanks, Rosie. All right.
Were great. The thing which made it only tolerable was that we knew this was unfinished business. Today we face just the problems which the protocol itself foresaw. The protocol, of course, as my right honourable friend has said, has provision for it to be changed. Can I just invite her, as I welcome this, the right solution for the way forward, and what nonsense we've heard. This is a solution that could be negotiated. As I welcome it, could I just ask her to repeat once again that we will protect the EU's legitimate interests as we restore the primacy of the Good Friday Agreement and the constitutional integrity of the UK?
Foreign Secretary. Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. We've already established the Trusted Trader Scheme. We've already established data sharing with the EU of commercial data. What we're proposing as part of this bill is proper enforcement to make sure the EU single market is protected. That is the best solution, in our view, that makes sure there is free flow of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, whilst at the same time protecting the EU single market. I think we have heard across the House today that people recognise there are real issues with the Northern Ireland Protocol. My number one preference is to get a negotiated solution with the EU, but they do have to be willing to look at these type of pragmatic solutions that will both protect the EU single market, but also the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the United Kingdom.
Ian Paisley.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary must be alarmed at the comments that emerged this morning from the Chairman of Marks and Spencer. Already he's had to close his business in France. His business in the Republic of Ireland is about to close. Oh, he's a Conservative, therefore he should not be doing business. That seems to be the Liberal view emerging. His business in the Republic of Ireland to export goods has to fill in 700 pages. It has to do that within an 8-hour period. It has to do some of that wording in Latin to satisfy the European community. And it also has to do it in a certain type font, or else it will not be allowed. It costs him an additional £30 million. He has said this morning on the radio that the EU has told him that they would like the same procedures for his businesses in Northern Ireland. This is a power grab. People talk about a trade war. This is a trade war to crush business in Northern Ireland. Will the Foreign Secretary ensure that whenever she's speaking to the Cabinet, that they know clearly that if they keep the protocol, power sharing isn't coming back?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I've been very clear in my statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we are bringing forward legislation to sort this issue out and to deal with the bureaucracy that we're seeing, the requirement for customs declarations, customs codes from businesses who are simply operating within the United Kingdom. That is why we want to create the green lane that allows properly protected goods to be freely move within the United Kingdom, and we're committed to that legislation. Now, if in the meantime, in parallel, the EU are prepared to move to a negotiated settlement to resolve the very issues the Honourable Gentleman is raising, of course we are open to those talks, but we will not allow it to delay us taking the action we need to take to restore the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
The Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, under my chairmanship, produced a comprehensive set of alternative arrangements that were workable and high-tech, that would erase the need for the current perniciously applied checks that most in this House agree are unnecessary. Given that they would satisfy the stated objections of the European Union, why does she think they have been stonewalled by the EU?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I'm not going to speculate as to why the EU has not changed its negotiating mandate, but I think it is very clear that there is a solution here. And my honourable friend worked very hard on this. There is a solution here that both satisfies the requirement to protect the EU single market, at the same time restores the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And we need to make sure we're moving forward as fast as we can to that solution.
Stephen Timms.
Speaker, to make his EU deal work, the Prime Minister inserted a border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Some accepted the absurd claim that there would not be any checks across that border. That misjudgment has proved electorally disastrous and potentially fatal to the Union. Today, the Foreign Secretary has announced that the government may well breach the agreement the Prime Minister negotiated. What assessment has she made of the impact of that announcement on trade negotiations underway with other countries around the world?
Like America? Foreign Secretary.
Well, there are very real issues, as we've heard today from all sides of the House, about the way the Northern Ireland Protocol is working, and we do need to fix the Northern Ireland Protocol. Our preference is for a negotiated solution, but if that is not possible, we are putting legislation through the House of Commons and through Parliament. And as I've already said in this statement, we are clear that this bill is legal in international law. Yes. So there is no question of violating international law.
Damien Green.
Deputy Speaker, depending on which newspaper I've read over the past 2 days, I could understand either that the government wants to tear up the protocol altogether, or that it sees this proposal as an insurance policy while negotiations continue. My right honourable friend this morning has been clear that the latter interpretation would be correct. Can I welcome that very much? And can I ask her also to try to ensure some consistency in government messaging while the negotiations are going on, that actually a negotiated settlement would be preferable?
Foreign Secretary.
There are some things that are within my power and there's some things that aren't. And controlling what the British media prints is simply not within my power. We are very clear, we're not about scrapping the protocol, we're not about tearing up the protocol. What we want is to change the protocol, ideally working with the European Union, but the mandate does have to change in order to get the changes on the ground that we need to see. But in the absence of that, the legislation will ensure that those changes are made. And as I say, there's provision specifically in the legislation to implement a negotiated solution. I was very clear about that in my statement.
Joanna Cherry.
Mr. Speaker, last week it was reported that the Attorney-General has provided legal advice as a background to this bill, and I've no doubt that will be based on her views on parliamentary sovereignty and the supremacy of domestic law, which she's previously favoured this chamber with the last time they were planning on breaking international law. Now, the Honourable Member for Stone says that we should ignore, and I quote, siren voices to the contrary. The difficulty for the Foreign Secretary, the Attorney-General and the Honourable Member for Stone is that the siren voices to the contrary include the United Kingdom Supreme Court. Yes. Has the Foreign Secretary read paragraph 55 of the judgment in the first Miller case, that's the case about triggering Article 50, in which the Supreme Court are quite clear that international treaties signed by the UK government are binding upon the UK in terms of international law, and as such, our obligations under them cannot be unilaterally rewritten. Is she aware of that?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we fully respect the rule of law, and we're very clear that this bill is in line with international law.
Order. I do realise the importance of this statement, and but I would inform members that we do have a very well subscribed debate afterwards as well. So if we could have quite brief questions, I think that would be helpful. Sir Desmond Swain.
What is absolutely clear, Madam Deputy Speaker,
is that those honourable members seeking to undermine the government's negotiating position haven't emerged from the trenches they dug themselves in the last Parliament, have they?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, what I do think we have heard today is that all sides of the House agree there is a real problem with the way the Northern Ireland Protocol is operating, and it needs to be solved. And I hear people saying that we want to get an agreed solution with the EU. I hope the EU will change their negotiating mandate so we are able to achieve that.
Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. She made it clear that one of the primary reasons for acting the way she is today is to try and get the executive back up and running in Northern Ireland. But she also said in her statement that the bill, and I quote, ensures that goods destined for the EU undergo full checks and controls. So there will still be checks. So on that basis, has she received an assurance from the DUP that even with these continued checks, they will agree to re-enter the executive?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I've been clear that our number one priority is restoring the balance in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which has been undermined by the operation of the protocol. And what we're proposing, and I will be bringing out more details of this in due course, is a green lane of trusted traders that's properly protected for goods into Northern Ireland, and a red lane for those goods that have to go through the full customs controls into the EU single market. And I'm very clear that part of our agreement, as well as protection of the UK single market, is the protection of the EU single market.
Rod Neil.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I particularly welcome the Foreign Secretary's repeated insistence it's our intention to seek a negotiated settlement. And echoing the words of my right honourable friend, the member for Hertfordshire North East, can I urge that is important, not just in terms of the overall objective, but also in terms of the United Kingdom's international reputation, and also to demonstrate that we act with the greatest concern for our legal obligations. Would you perhaps consider in due course making available the draft of any proposed legislation so that those who wish to work constructively with the government to make sure we do this lawfully can perhaps test the proportionality of those measures against the objectives and against the legal advice which I know she has already received?
Foreign Secretary.
As I've said, our priority is to secure a negotiated solution. It will require the EU changing its mandate, and I do hope that following today's statement and the comments by people right across this House, that we will see some more flexibility from the EU. And we are committed to acting in line with international law. We're very clear about that. We'll set out our legal position in due course. I'm very happy to have more discussions with my honourable friend about the precise contents of the bill.
Campbell.
The State referenced the issue of the need to ensure no hard border on the island of Ireland. Would you accept from me that there's no possibility that that could happen? It's simply not practical, not possible, there's no political consent for it, and would be easily avoided if it were to come about. So that is a nonsense that needs to be dismissed. But in terms of the cross-community consensus, can she assure the House and the people of Northern Ireland that her bill will be placed before Parliament, before the summer recess, in order for people to see what progress has been made practically rather than the words?
Foreign Secretary.
I'm very clear that we will be bringing the bill out in the coming weeks. That is an important priority for this government, and we understand that we cannot see any more delay. We've already had 18 months of negotiations with the EU on this issue. Regrettably, we're not yet in a position where the EU is willing to consider changing the protocol. That is why we are obliged to take forward the bill. During that time, as I've been very clear, we remain open to negotiations, provided there is a willingness to address the real issues on the ground in Northern Ireland.
Pete Bone.
Madam Deputy Speaker, you'll remember the years, I think it was, of negotiating to try and withdraw from the European Union under the previous Prime Minister. And it was dragged out and dragged out by the European Union. It was only when we had the new Prime Minister who was going to act decisively that we got the withdrawal from the EU, we got a free trade agreement without any quotas. So may I suggest to the Foreign Secretary, Madam Deputy Speaker, that she should publish this bill straight away and get on with it, because the only way you're going to get the EU to come to the negotiation table and really negotiate with you is if you threaten them with that bill. So can she be more precise exactly when that bill is coming in? Is it next week or the week after?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. It is urgent that we act, and I can assure my honourable friend that this bill is coming in the following weeks.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The businesses and communities dealing with the consequences of Brexit need honesty and certainty, not the chaos and confusion of a potential trade war. So can the Foreign Secretary reassure them? She's repeatedly today said that what she intends to do is in line with international law and talked about the TCA. I know she won't publish as yet the legal advice, but can she tell us which international laws she intends to abide by, what the adjudication mechanism might be, and whether the EU has agreed to it?
Well, as I've made clear, our proposals are legal in international law, and we'll set out the legal position in due course.
Dave Jones.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Foreign Secretary has put forward sensible and practical proposals for protecting the integrity of the EU single market. Those could be quite easily reciprocated by the European Union. Could my right honourable friend say, if she has put these proposals to Mr Šefčovič, what has been his response, and if he has refused to accept them, what reason has he given?
Foreign Secretary.
I have put these proposals to Vice President Šefčovič, and we have had extensive discussions about how we make sure that both the UK single market and the EU single market has been protected. The issue for the European Commission in terms of accepting our proposals is that his mandate does not extend to changing the protocol, and he is therefore unable to accept the proposals on that basis.
Drew Hendry.
Madam Speaker, what the Foreign Secretary and our government is proposing here today will impact on all of our constituents. So can she explain to the people of Inverness, Nairn, Badenoch and Strathspey how unilaterally breaking an international treaty and potentially sparking a trade war will help them with the price increases they're facing at the moment of £20 a week on their average weekly shop?
Foreign Secretary.
Our priority in putting forward this legislation is to protect the hard-won peace and stability inherent in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And that is our priority, and that is why we are taking this bill forward. But we're very clear that in our proposals that protect the EU single market, that make sure there is no irregular activity, that the EU are no worse off as a result of the proposals.
Kelly Tolhurst.
Mr. Speaker, and I welcome my right honourable friend's statement this morning. Sadly, last week at the UK-EU Parliamentary Partnership Assembly, the Vice President Šefčovič used language which I found to be incredibly disappointing in relation to the UK. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it is also incumbent on the EU to enter into sensible negotiations with the United Kingdom in order to find practical and deliverable solutions for the real problems that the people of Northern Ireland are facing? Because it's incumbent on us and the EU to work together to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland.
Foreign Secretary.
We've engaged in negotiations with the EU in good faith. We do want to achieve the practical solution in all of the areas I laid out, including on customs, including on taxation, including on governance. But fundamentally, that does require a new mandate so that we can see the increased flexibility that is going to deliver for the people of Northern Ireland.
Sammy Wilson.
I first of all welcome the commitment which the Foreign Secretary has made to addressing this issue. But could I urge her
not to give in to those who shamelessly today in this House have almost urged the EU to engage in a trade war with the UK, and have also urged her to dismiss the views of the majority unionist community, contrary to the Good Friday Agreement, and also have ignored the fact that the EU has not acted in good faith and lived up to its commitments to seek alternative arrangements to the Northern Ireland Protocol. But does she realise that, given broken promises in the past, we can only judge what has been said today when we actually see a bill progressing through this House with the terms in that bill outlining the points which she has made?
Foreign Secretary.
We are committed to bringing forward legislation to deal with this very real issue that is upsetting the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. That is why I'm making this statement today. That is why we are clear that we need to act.
Marcus Fish.
Deputy Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree with me that the priority that she's given to the Belfast Agreement is correct, but also that the reasonable evolution that she is putting forward to the protocol is something that not only wouldn't make the EU worse off, it's actually better in terms of border arrangements than they have, for example, on their eastern flank with trade with Belarus here?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend makes an important point, that the proposals that we are putting forward secure the single market. They share the data which we're already doing on commercial data about goods crossing the Irish Sea, as well as having very strong enforcement provisions that compare very favourably with other customs arrangements around the world.
Stephen Kinnett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A veterinary agreement would remove the vast majority of barriers to trade between GB and Northern Ireland. It's widely supported by farmers, fishermen, by the 5 parties in Northern Ireland, by the European Union, by the United States government. Can the Foreign Secretary please explain why she has failed to agree a veterinary agreement with the European Union? That is surely the pragmatic solution she keeps saying that she wants to have.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, there are various issues in the protocol that are preventing the free flow of trade between GB and Northern Ireland, including customs codes as well. And what I want is a comprehensive solution that creates a green channel that shares that commercial data.
Andrew Bowie.
Absolutely. International agreements are renegotiated and reopened all the time. Indeed, the European Union is a persistent and repeat renegotiator of international agreements, so much so it was written into the protocol that this could be renegotiated. And whilst I also heard Mario Sefcovic say last week we could get to a landing zone on this, it's quite clear that the EU's overzealous interpretation of some elements of the protocol and his lack of mandate to get us there is preventing us making our way to that landing ground. So does she agree with me that the legislation that she is proposing is the only way that we can ensure the primacy of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and the integrity of our United Kingdom?
Foreign Secretary.
The proposals we're putting forward that deal with the customs bureaucracy, that deal with the tax inequality, are ultimately the solution that we need to deliver. Now, if the EU has a new mandate that is prepared to look at those things, there is a landing zone with the EU. I'm very clear about that. But in the absence of that new mandate, we have to act, because this is about protecting the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. It's about protecting the balance between the communities in Northern Ireland. That's ultimately about protecting the entire United Kingdom.
Amy Callan.
The Prime Minister told this House in 2019 that the protocol he negotiated was a great success for Northern Ireland, fully compatible with the Good Friday Agreement. So to be clear, why is this government now abandoning its oven-ready Brexit deal?
Foreign Secretary.
The protocol was agreed in good faith by the Prime Minister, but it has had unintended consequences. And it's the duty of the government to make sure that we restore the balance in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Okay, Longy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I warmly welcome the statement from the Foreign Secretary, and will she agree with me that whilst we have heard many reasoned and good evidence of examples from members opposite as to why the protocol is not working, we've not heard a single example, other than perhaps a veterinary treatment, I think, that shows what may be the pathway forward to solving any of these problems, other than saying that whatever she does and this government does must be wrong, obviously. So will she assure me that the proposed legislation will, in fact, deal with all of these complex issues and put to bed, once and for all, the issues that we have in Northern Ireland for the benefit of the people of Northern Ireland as one united kingdom?
Foreign Secretary. Well, the provisions in our bill will do just that. And I think we've heard acknowledgement from the party opposite that there are real concerns about the way the Northern Ireland Protocol is operating. But what we need to move to is the solution, which does require the EU to change their mandate and to change the terms in the protocol itself, because otherwise we can't address those customs issues, we can't address those tax issues, and I would urge the party opposite to look at that in more detail.
Gavin Robinson.
Can I sincerely lament that there are some MPs today, particularly from Northern Ireland, who have introduced a level of majoritarianism. That's not going to work in Northern Ireland. That's not how our system operates. But can I offer welcome to the Foreign Secretary's statement today and to the work that the Northern Ireland Secretary has engaged in for some time now. This House is aware of the white paper that was published last summer, aware that the conditions to trigger Article 16 had been met, and are now fully aware of the constitutional imperative for good governance and democracy in Northern Ireland, that this is resolved. But can I implore the Foreign Secretary, in recognising that it is urgent, that weeks and weeks for the introduction of legislation, the passage of that legislation, isn't enough. We need to see movement now.
Foreign Secretary. Well, the reason I'm giving the statement to the House today is because we are bringing forward legislation in the coming weeks to address the precise issues that the honourable gentleman mentioned. And he is right. Ultimately, the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is founded on power sharing, on respect for all communities in Northern Ireland, and that is what we are reflecting in our proposed solutions.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Foreign Secretary's statement. The path my right honourable friend has set out is exactly the right one. But as there has been 18 months of negotiation so far that has been met with what Lord Trimble describes in his article today as a brick wall of intransigence, whilst a negotiated agreement is indeed the preferable one, the issues thrown up by the protocol in its interpretation by the EU today are throwing up such serious consequences to the Good Friday Agreement and to our economy and to our union. Will she set a deadline by which negotiations must be completed by?
Foreign Secretary. Well, to be clear with my honourable friend, we are bringing forward legislation in the coming weeks, and that legislation will progress through Parliament as normal as legislation does. Now, in parallel to that, if we are able to reach a negotiated solution with the EU, which will require them to change their mandate, then by the time that the bill goes to royal assent, we can put that into the bill. But we will not allow those negotiations to slow down the path of legislation. That is very important because we understand that the situation is urgent. We've already had 18 months of negotiations which haven't yet borne fruit, and therefore we cannot allow any more delay to take place.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I press the Foreign Secretary on why she's laying the ground for a trade war with our largest trading partners, just as the Bank of England is warning of an apocalyptic rise in food prices, because those are the tactics and the threats that she's making? And will she meet with the UK Trade and Business Commission to discuss our recommendations for a way of removing the bulk of checks in the Irish Sea with a veterinary agreement and standards protection? The Honourable Member for Aberravon made the same point. She said she wants a wider agreement, but why not start with that veterinary agreement and with standards, unless in fact she's aiming to dilute standards and remove them?
Foreign Secretary. Well, I'm very clear that our proposed solution reduces bureaucracy all round and makes the EU no worse off in that we continue to protect the single market, we continue to supply that commercial data, we'll have strong enforcement mechanisms. I'm very happy to hear the Honourable Lady's ideas in more detail, but the fundamental issue is those customs requirements that are baked into the protocol are creating this bureaucracy, and without changing the protocol, we're not able to deal with that.
Robin Miller.
Honourable friend's statement and her determination to see progress in this. I welcome too the contributions from many members who've made the point that change is necessary. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that in fact we share common goals of economic prosperity for Northern Ireland, of preserving the Belfast Good Friday Agreement and actually the integrity of our respective unions? And does she think that a focus on these goals is the key to getting us through the next months?
Secretary.
My honourable friend makes a very good point. We do share those goals. I know everybody in this House is committed to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. I've heard many across this House express an understanding of the problems that the Northern Ireland Protocol is causing. I think where there is disagreement is how we pursue those goals. And as I've said, I'm open to a negotiated settlement, but it does require changes to the protocol. And what we can't allow is any further delay, which would have a worsening effect on the position in Northern Ireland and undermine further the Belfast Good Friday Agreement.
Vera Hobhouse.
Brexit is already making people poorer. The government is now risking plunging the UK into a trade war with our closest neighbour and biggest trading partner. For farmers in Somerset and Devon, this would be a disaster. The Foreign Secretary, when she was the Trade Secretary, has already sold farmers down the river. So is she prepared to do the same again for farmers across the southwest who are already teetering on the brink?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I don't agree with the Honourable Lady's characterisation as my time as Trade Secretary, where we open new opportunities for British farmers around the world. And I've always believed that the food that Britain produces is so excellent, it is well capable of competing with other offers around the world.
Jack Brereton.
My right honourable friend agree that we should send a very clear message to those in Brussels who would wish to see us backslide on Brexit or undermine and break up our precious union, that this will never be acceptable to this government.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I've been very clear that our priority is restoring the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And whilst our preference is to secure a negotiated outcome with the European Union, we cannot delay in taking the action we need to take to restore that balance in the Good Friday Agreement and protect our precious union.
Barry Gardner.
Emergency safeguarding measures are provided with the legal basis under the protocol, but under the protocol they can only be temporary. The problem the Secretary of State has is that there is no basis, legal basis within the protocol for a permanent change. She says that she wants a negotiated settlement, and of course we would all seek to have that. But how is the bill that she proposes to introduce into this House unilaterally going to change the position in international law, which is that she cannot unilaterally abrogate the treaty that she signed?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, as I've said, the bill is legal in international law, and we will be setting out the position in due course.
James Davis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for her statement. Will she comment on the transfer of data within the UK's Trusted Trader scheme to the EU and how that process could be further improved?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we're already sharing large amounts of data that we collect as part of the Trusted Trader scheme with the EU to give reassurance that trade isn't being diverted from the GB Northern Ireland route into the EU, and we want to build on that with enforcement measures so that those violating the Trusted Trader scheme are not allowed to continue to do so.
Paul Girvan.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Foreign Secretary, I'm just wondering where we would be today if the DUP had have given in and set up an executive. Would we be at this position where we have got a start, I call this a start, to trying to redress some of the problems we have with the Northern Ireland Protocol? And in doing so, I want to just highlight one area. Many people within Northern Ireland see the Protocol as the introduction of a surrender act for Northern Ireland to become part of an all-Ireland economy. And that has created its own difficulties. And many people have focused on to do with veterinary medicine and to do with food, but it affects every aspect of our economy. But it's mainly, I'm really worried about the constitutional position and the message that that has given to Northern Ireland. Those who've seen it as a surrender act, I'm telling you today, it is no surrender.
Foreign Secretary.
There are fundamental issues that have been exposed since the protocol came into being that have damaged the East-West relationship for Northern Ireland, which is a key tenet of the Good Friday Agreement. Those issues will have to be fixed, otherwise they will be a running sore.
Alan Brown.
Madam Deputy Speaker, if the Foreign Secretary had some self-awareness, she would realise the argument there were unintended consequences of the protocol and the EU need to change because they're somehow acting in bad faith by upholding the deal that the UK government negotiated. She realised that's a ridiculous argument. But if she has such an obvious customs solution that won't cost companies any more in IT rollout and will actually save companies money in the UK and in Europe and protect the European single market, why doesn't she just publish these proposals just now if they're so obvious and easy to move forward on?
Foreign Secretary.
I've explained the outline of the proposals and I will be publishing more details in due course.
Claire Hanna.
Very much. It's curious that the Foreign Secretary chose to quote polling rather than fresh election results that show a comfortable majority of people support the protocol and an even larger majority reject the idea of holding the institutions to ransom. The Foreign Secretary is misrepresenting our position and the position of the people of Northern Ireland who want the protocol as a protection from Brexit, and while they are happy to see it evolve, they know that there wasn't a whisper about consent or consensus when the party opposite and the party below me were voting gleefully for ever harder versions of Brexit. Where there is unanimity, it is in distrust for the cynical approach of this government, and I ask, when will this government stop using our fragile, shared society for their own malign political needs?
Foreign Secretary.
The Honourable Lady knows that the Belfast Good Friday Agreement is based on the principle of power sharing, and that requires the consent of all communities in Northern Ireland, and that is what we are seeking to achieve with the legislation we're putting forward.
Carla Lockhart.
Madam Deputy Speaker, other members have referenced Lord Trimble's article where he says the government must now act on its responsibility to safeguard the future of Northern Ireland and replace this damaging and community-splitting protocol. And with his comments in mind, one really wonders what John Hume would make of the divisive and majoritarian approach of his successor from the member for Foyle. The Foreign Secretary's statement is welcome and correctly identifies some of the fundamental problems with the protocol and the need to act in the absence of agreement with the EU. Given the Foreign Secretary has accepted the need to address these issues urgently, does she understand that good intentions for another day will do nothing to address the urgent problems faced, and we need to have words backed up with actions immediately?
Secretary.
As I've said, we'll be bringing forward legislation in the coming weeks.
Christine Jardine.
Deputy Speaker, I wonder if the Foreign Secretary appreciates the extent of the frustration and anger amongst not just this side of the bench but in the country for the fact that she comes here today and talks about unintended consequences of an agreement which this government signed and were warned would have exactly these consequences. And she talks about protecting our precious union. Does she appreciate that the consequences of a unilateral withdrawal from the Northern Ireland Protocol would have serious implications for that union that she seeks to protect?
Foreign Secretary.
Let me be clear, we're not talking about withdrawing from the protocol, we're not talking about scrapping the protocol. What we are talking about is legislation to fix the specific issues in the protocol that are causing problems in Northern Ireland.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's not just about how people in Northern Ireland voted recently. In August 2016, the former DUP First Minister wrote to the UK Government calling for a special position for Northern Ireland, and people supported that. Anyone who has been to Northern Ireland, as I was recently, and issues that were raised here about supermarket goods, realises there are pragmatic issues to be solved. But they need to be solved with the EU. So exactly how does unilateral threats and legislation build the trust and goodwill necessary to get to the best outcome?
Foreign Secretary.
I do believe there is a landing zone. I believe there is a negotiated outcome that can work for the people of Northern Ireland, for the UK and the EU. But that landing zone does require a change in mandate. And we've now had 18 months of discussions with the EU where there has not yet been agreement by the EU to change the protocol. The protocol was never designed to be set in stone. And what we have seen is the way it's operated is not working for the people of Northern Ireland. So, of course, I encourage a pragmatic solution. I encourage more flexibility from the EU. But we cannot allow the situation in Northern Ireland to deteriorate by not taking the actions we need to now to fix the protocol.
Jim Shannon.
Speaker, can I thank the Secretary of State for her statement this morning and for her clear attempts to try and find a way forward, which we all want. Anger is rising in Northern Ireland in relation to the Northern Ireland Protocol. On the radio this morning, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee made some comments. I have notified the Honourable Member at 10:46 a.m. this morning, so he will know I'm going to mention him. The Northern Ireland Affairs Committee Chair commented this morning that filling out a form to buy something shouldn't make someone less British, which illustrates his woeful misunderstanding of the Unionist position and further, Madam Deputy Speaker, undermines his ability to act impartially as Chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee.
Absolutely. Here.
Does the Secretary of State agree that this is precisely the reason that tension has been escalating, and would the Secretary of State further understand that this typifies why the Unionist community that we represent have lost faith, and that words cannot restore that faith? What we need to see, which I think the Secretary of State is saying, we need to see concrete legislation and less harmful discourse.
Tree.
We are very clear that we need to restore the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, and we need to ensure that all communities in Northern Ireland are treated with esteem.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As you know, Madam Deputy Speaker, we spent so much time debating the Northern Ireland Protocol that there could not have been a dot or a comma that this government was unaware of. So given that, could the Secretary of State tell us, was the government simply unable to understand the implications of its own protocol deal, or was it when the Prime Minister presented his oven-ready Brexit deal, he did so knowing he would end up deliberately breaking international law? So what are we looking at here, Secretary of State? Is this government stupidity or government duplicity?
Foreign Secretary.
Well, we negotiated the Northern Ireland Protocol in good faith, and I've been negotiating in good faith with Maroš Šefčovič. But what we have seen is real consequences for the people of Northern Ireland, which need to be addressed.
Hal Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under the current Brexit arrangements, freight trade through Holyhead is down 34%, whilst in Ireland, trade north-south is up by 34%, and trade south-north is up by 49%. Does she accept that Economic fundamentals such as these argue against her taking precipitate unilateral action on the protocol.
Foreign Secretary.
Well, I think the figures that the honourable gentleman has just raised demonstrate there has been trade diversion in Northern Ireland, and they demonstrate that we do need to restore the balance of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement to make sure East-West is treated with equal esteem as North-South.
I thank the Foreign Secretary for her statement. Point of order, Annalise Dodds.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. On a point of order, I would like to humbly beg your advice on a matter of significant importance. On the 25th of February 2019, my honourable friend, the member for Aberavon, wrote to the then chair of the Conservative Party, the Right Honourable Member for Great Yarmouth, expressing genuine concerns regarding issues of sovereignty and national security related to the activities of the then Conservative Party Treasurer, Sir Ehud Schellig. The Right Honourable Member for Great Yarmouth responded that my friend should, and I quote, consider any accusations he was making against an individual carefully so as not to risk libel, with the implication that legal action would be forthcoming should my honourable friend pursue his genuine concerns. Last Thursday, however, an article in the New York Times suggested that my honourable friend was right and that there are genuine questions to answer about whether a donation from Sir Ehud to the Conservative Party complied with UK law, given that it appears to have originated from his father-in-law, Sergei Kopytov, a former senior pro-Kremlin politician in Ukraine and apparent owner of significant assets in Crimea. Additional serious questions arise, Madam Deputy Speaker. Did Sir Ehud host a reception with the Russian ambassador to the UK following the annexation of Crimea? Are assets apparently owned by Mr Kopytov, like, for example, a Mercedes-Benz car, used by individuals involved in the Russian state? Did the bank transfer at issue in the New York Times article originate from a Russian bank? Were sanctioned entities involved? Exactly what current and former links do the Schellig-Kopytov family hold with key actors in the Russian state? And finally, has electoral law been broken, and relatedly, has our national security been compromised? I've written, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the current co-chair of the Conservative Party, the Right Honourable Member for Hartsmere, asking for an apology for my friend for Aberavon, and above all, a response to these very important questions. However, Madam Deputy Speaker, when I've written to him before, indeed 6 times before, I have never received a response. I live in hope for a response this time, but should I not receive one in the coming days, I wonder, Madam Deputy Speaker, what recourse I might have given the gravity of these matters.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order. First of all, I assume that she has notified any Right Honourable or Honourable members that she's named that she has done so. I'm afraid that correspondence between members on a party basis is not a matter for the chair. I'm sure she knows or will acquaint herself with the many ways of pursuing this substantive point in proceedings, as well as by raising concerns, perhaps with the Electoral Commission, given the content of what she has said. Thank you. Point of order, Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On a point of order, on Wednesday the 27th of April, I asked the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Questions if he would apologise to bereaved families and care workers in light of the High Court ruling that found the government had broken the law when in 2020 it discharged patients to care homes without testing them for COVID first. In his response, I believe that the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House by claiming that the thing we did not know in particular was that COVID could be transmitted asymptomatically. This was raised as a point of order by the Right Honourable Member for Bristol West on Thursday the 28th of April. I appreciate, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you are not responsible for the contents of the Prime Minister's speech, but I am sure that none of us want the record to be inaccurate. As such, I was wondering, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether you had received any indication from the Prime Minister that he intends to correct the record, for example, at the start of Prime Minister's questions tomorrow, and if not, what further avenues might be available to me and other members to ensure that the Prime Minister returns to the House and corrects the record if he chooses not to do so when he appears tomorrow.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order. First of all, I haven't received any notification about anything the Prime Minister might be saying tomorrow. And I should also say that, as she knows and referred herself in her point of order, this matter was raised on the 28th of